my friends. Today's guest is a former criminal who has made his way through many stages of the prison system. His name is Todd Flood. Todd and I have been friends since 1990, but lost contact for about 11 years while he pursued a life of criminality. Todd and I reconnected in 2008 and have maintained our friendship through social media. In this current day, Todd is a committed activist and is an observer of police activities during protests with the Lawyers Guild. Welcome, Todd. Thank you for sharing this time with me.
Hi, Rick. Thanks for having me.
Let's just start with the tough questions. What made you pursue a life of criminality?
In my life, in my early life, my childhood, I learned a lot from the adults that I was around, and of course, you're a kid, and you observe the things that they're doing, and there was a lot of drugs and selling of drugs, and a lot of the stuff that goes with it. I watch people get arrested, and a lot of the people in the neighborhood I lived in were on some level, at least leading a double life of things that are outside of the law. Other people that I was around that lived these more normal lives, and like my grandparents, for instance, that lived that American dream kind of family life, and but they still drank heavily. My mom's parents did, and had a lot of issues that were different, and I definitely had a odd upbringing, and it influenced a lot of my later choices.
Did it give you a sense of thrill? Maybe excitement?
The answer to that is both yes and no. It depends on what's going on, but if you're doing something that is illegal or frowned upon, or there's the time leading up to the moment that you're doing that, and then there's the time afterwards, right? And there's that when it's occurring is very brief. There's a lot of anxiety for sure that leads up to any sort of activity that's outside of the norm, I guess, or legal. And then there's an extreme adrenaline rush, depending on what it is. It could be anything from breaking into somewhere, or just walking out of the store with something you haven't paid for, or things of that nature. And then you get this adrenaline rush, which is an addiction in and of itself. You see that all over the place. People that are jumping out of airplanes, or all those other weird things that people do, bungee jumping, all kind of stuff. That's what they're getting, is that adrenaline rush. It's a really heavy high, I guess you could call it. And you add that with a bunch of other substances, probably, or for my case, that's what I was doing, and it's pretty intense, and it becomes addictive in itself. So yeah, the answer to that is yes, but there's a lot of other things that go along with it, like I said, like anxiety.
Were you proud of what you were doing?
Again, that's a yes or no situation. I definitely had this sense of a set of rules for myself that would allow me to justify my actions in some way to myself. Like say not stealing from a mom and pop operation, or just from the general public, working class people. Like construction tools is a big no-no, and stay away from that. That's not. I'm not justifying that currently in my life now. I don't see that as a justification or that made me more of an upstanding criminal or whatever. But at the time, it allowed me to justify all kind of erratic behavior that was harmful to myself and the people around me. And yeah, but to say that I was proud of myself would probably be a stretch. I don't think I would say no to that.
How did this affect your family?
Like I mentioned before, I kind of learned this double life thing that from the people around me, that you try best you can to maintain this appearance of leading a normal life, and I when we knew each other, was married, we lived in a house, I had kids, they went to school, I had a job, I went to school myself, and I was also doing all this other stuff. Like, at that time it was pretty minor. I was growing marijuana in my backyard, which was a felony at the time, and supplementing that with other things, and but the effect on my family was definitely, an absent father, somebody who was not living up to the responsibilities that I had at the time, and that the effects are long term and hard to determine.
You and I were pretty good friends, and we were still hanging out at the beginning stages of your life of criminality. But I had no idea of this. I mean, you really kept it on the hush.
I guess that goes back to my childhood and my watching the people that were around me and understanding that 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 that's what you do. You keep if you're trying to lead a double life, you need to keep that other life out of spotlight, out of the light, especially the people that aren't involved. Um, and you were not involved, and it was. I hesitate to say that I was trying to protect anyone or trying to help that, make sure to insulate anybody that was around me from things. But that is part of it. It's also self-interest. I mean, people, for legal reasons, or you don't want more. The less people that know about what's going on, the better for you.
Did you commit any crimes like robbery or maybe physically harm anybody?
Yeah, robbery is definitely on the list. There's a lot of different levels of robbery. There's, you know, just straight robbery, which is, just stealing something. Or there's, a strong arm robbery where you're threatening violence and forcing someone to give you something, or the home invasion robbery where the people are there and you're in the house, which is something I never did. Um, or strong arm robbery either, but and then there's where you're. One of the things that I was doing was various people. I'll just call them. We'll just say that they're organized, and they like to insulate themselves too, but they still want things and they don't want to pay for them, and they they will have a list that they want, and if you're able to get those things, they pay more for them because they've requested them. It's just a way that things work, and definitely engaged in a lot of stuff like that. And then didn't, never stuck a gun in anybody's face and anything like that. But those same people, the other people I was involved with, they'd come to us, and if they needed some kind of collections done, or things of that nature, where you're just openly threatening people, and there's a lot that goes along with that. Um, Again, it's not necessarily a good idea to discuss things too specifically with that.
How many times were you in prison? What were you arrested for? How did they catch you?
In total, let's see, I did 3 terms and 12 violations. Prison term is where you're arrested, charged with a crime, and sentenced to prison, and you're sent there for a certain amount of time. And then a violation is when you're out of prison, you're on parole, and you're supposed to be on the up and up during that time. And if you violate any of the terms of the parole, which are pretty lengthy, you can be sent back for 30, 90, could be up to a year or more. And I did 12 of those. And let's see, what I was arrested for, many different things. The prison terms were, the first 2 were just possession of methamphetamines, which was a felony at the time. And the third one was sales. And, but I was arrested many times for many different things. A lot of times I was caught was, let's see, the first possession charge, I was at a friend's where they were staying, which was a motel room, and I was just out in the back of the motel by my truck and digging through the truck bed for some reason, and some undercover police. They weren't undercover. They were in an unmarked vehicle though. Drove through, saw me. I didn't realize. They just saw a car go by. I had no idea they were police, and they just snuck up behind me, grabbed me right away, and searched me, and all this stuff. And they found a small amount of meth, which is a felony.
So, after that first time in prison, why did you continue a life of criminality, knowing that you could end up in prison again?
Well, that's an easy one. It's not, even though prison's horrible, and jail is horrible, and getting arrested, having handcuffs on, going to court, all of that stuff. It's all terrible. But it's not a deterrent. At least not for somebody like a guy like me. I did things in spite of the consequences. The consequences weren't a consideration. It wasn't something that was important in the moment to me. It only became important when I was dealing with them. And I didn't. It didn't seem like there was any sort of solution to this problem. I definitely felt trapped in the system and in the life I was leading, and it didn't seem like there was any way out. I learned a statistic there that 80% of us were going to be right back in the system. And I definitely didn't want that to happen, but it did anyways. Further information showed me that I was really the only thing in the way of getting out of that life. That was myself, and that I needed to change the way I did things and address the issues that I had, and in order to change those things. And prison and jail don't allow any opportunity to do that.
What was the food like? Did some people get better food than others?
Let me tell you, there's county jail food and there's prison food. Very different things. Some of the things they have in common are there's nowhere near enough of it. Um, I really learned a lot about being hungry in both jail and prison. Uh, they're supposed to give you 2,000 calories a day. County jail, especially, they don't give you any time to eat it at all. But in prison, I worked in the kitchen several times. Got you get extra food there. You also see how stuff is made, which is not the greatest, but it it's mostly mystery meat and maybe some potatoes. Yeah, the really good stuff was like hard boiled eggs. It's like real food, or you get chicken every once in a while, which is also everybody was real happy about. Um, there was this one at Chino. Every once in a while, this would come up, and it was supposed to be spinach, but it looked like grass clippings. I mean, spinach is kind of broad leaves, and has a certain color to it. Grass is really narrow, and it looks like grass. It tasted like grass. It didn't. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they were serving us grass, and usually when that would come up, I would convince everybody else at the table with me that it was grass, because it pretty obviously was, and then that would usually cause them to not eat it, and so I would eat their grass. But yeah, mostly there's not enough food at all.
Once in prison, what was the system like? Were you given a job? Did they pay you for your work?
Okay, one thing to keep in mind is if you read the 13th Amendment, which is Lincoln's amendment that freed the slaves, right? It says right in there, it reads, uh, abolish slavery except in cases of criminals. Uh, so there you have it. But then they definitely give you a job, eventually, right? You go through your time in reception, and they call that you're waiting for a bag, right? And what that means is you get one day when you're at Chow or somewhere else, and you come back, and there'll be a paper bag outside your door with your name on it, and a series of letters that represent the prison that you're going to. Like the first time I got a bag, it was CIM, um, which is Chino Institute for Men. My first job in prison was in the scullery, AM scullery, which is where you wash the pots and pans. And I believe what they paid me was 7 cents an hour. Right. And but I had some other skills besides being able to, keep track of pans. And I wound up being a facilities maintenance guy in the hospital, which is a big step up pay wise. I went from 7 cents to just under a dollar. I believe it was 90 cents an hour.
Did you notice other prisoners being treated differently or maybe getting preferential treatment?
Well, there's a definite hierarchy among prisoners. The different depends on where you came from, what group you're associated with. So they'll organize it in what they call cars, right? There's one person who has the keys to the car, and say uh, the wood pile, which is what I was associated with, would have uh, cars based on county. So it's an Orange County car, and there'd be a certain amount of people from that group that would be, and there'd be a person with the keys to that car, and that person would be in charge of that car. And then there was the person who had the keys to the whole wood pile, and then there were the people that had the keys to the yard and all that other stuff. And then there were other, like there were certain jobs that you could get that were better than other jobs, like a porter job or working in the offices or something, as a like kind of secretary, and they would get preferential treatment for sure. It wasn't much, but it was better than what we had. And they won't put a brown guy and a white guy on the same bunk or in the same cell. So there you're classified, and then you do a lot more waiting, and then they send you to your housing unit, and there's a little indoctrination there with whoever the CO is on staff, and then you get and the prisoners have their own rules, and you have your paperwork there, list your charges, and they don't want, they're looking for certain charges that are an issue, rape, anything to do with kids, little kids. Uh, it's a whole list of them. I don't remember what they all are. And you present that, and then you're okay, and then they run down their rules. These showers are for us, and those ones are for the blacks and the others, and we're getting along with these guys right now, and we're not getting along with them right now, and these guys have drugs, and those guys have tobacco, and there's all this, nonsense basically that goes on. A lot of what they call politics.
Would you say there are forms of slavery in the prison system?
I already touched on this a little bit. Stuff like something you hear about a lot is fire camp, right? So if you have a certain amount of time, you can sign up for fire camp, and you get time taken off your sentence, and you get better food, better housing, an easier lifestyle, and you go and they train you, and you're a firefighter. You go and they have these big, huge forest fires, and you go out there and you risk your life, and you get paid $1 an hour for extremely hazardous labor, and it's coerced. It's coercion. And again, like I said, the 13th Amendment doesn't abolish slavery. It abolished the version of chattel slavery that was prevalent in this country for over 400 years, which was the worst version of slavery that the world has seen. By that metric, you could say that it's a little better, but there's a reason why we have the largest prison population in the world, per capita and otherwise. It's strictly because of that, and I don't have any of the statistics with me, but most of these major companies, corporations, Amazon, Walmart, uh, places like that use prison labor and pay them nothing, next to nothing, to do it. So yeah, I would definitely say that all the labor that goes on there is slave labor.
How about corruption?
I think it goes all the way down to the lowest man on the totem pole. There's stuff going on all throughout the system, and it's not what it's supposed to be.
Was there anything you observed that bothered you or maybe spooked you?
I will tell you one. Like I mentioned before, I think that I did work in the hospital at Chino, CIM, and uh, there's a lot of horrible things that go on in there. Just like the first time I saw the cages that they put the patients in, that they're supposed to, to have a meeting with their doctor. These guys are in this tiny little cage, and it's just an empty cage by itself is kind of spooky. And but while I was working there, it was a big deal. They had this giant riot on one of the yards, one of the yard I was on, and a lot of people were seriously injured. A couple people died, but I was ordered to leave, go back to my housing right away, and which I did. I had to go to the front, and as I was coming in to their CEO was holding a prisoner who was just bleeding. I couldn't tell from where, but he was bleeding quite a bit. He was completely unconscious, and he had him by his pants and by his back of his shirt, and just threw him into a holding cell. And he kind of slid along the floor, and his blood and the blood of other people. There was a few people that were bleeding in that cage.
What, Todd, would you say was the biggest lesson you learned from being in prison?
It's a great question, by the way. I would, in my previous life, I used all the stuff that happened in prison as a justification for bad behavior, for selfish, self-centered behavior, uh, harmful, uh, hurtful things that didn't do anybody any good, even me. And having found a solution to the issues that I had that brought me to that place, the drug addiction, alcohol, and alcoholism. Uh, One of the main ideas, or one of the main things that you need in the future free from those things, is gratitude. And my experiences in prison now, rather than being a justification for bad behavior, is an opportunity for just this instant gratitude. A good example is I get migraines every once in a while, and it's no respecter of where I'm at or what I'm doing. It'll just happen. And some of the worst ones I've ever had were in there, and I still get them now. And it's a lot easier take some of the suffering out of it for to be able to be grateful that this is nowhere near as bad as those times. That's my answer. Is that gratitude is what I take away from it.
Todd, I thank you for spending this time with me. I found this conversation to be very insightful. I'll be seeing you again next week for the second part of our conversation.
Thank you, Rick. Thanks for having me. I look forward to our next talk. Bye.